House is expected to formalize an impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden. Over the last few months, members of the Oversight Committee have collected bank and financial records as well as other documents. The committee is focusing on members of the Biden family and their business dealings. Democrats say the impeachment inquiry is illegitimate. Meanwhile, the president's son, Hunter Biden, indicted on 9 tax charges this week. In the 56-page indictment, prosecutors say instead of paying his taxes, Hunter spent his money on drugs, escorts, and girlfriends, as well as luxury hotels and rental properties, and everything but his taxes between 2016 and October 15th of 2020.
Why was he paid these millions of dollars? This is looking more like criminal activity than business activity.
I think that he is, being not targeted, but treated perhaps a little differently because of who he is.
I think the members of the majority party realize that the American people overwhelmingly want to know what's going on here.
Well, Comer is expected to formalize the impeachment inquiry into President Biden by Tuesday. A lot to get to this Sunday morning. I want to welcome in our panel. Bryan Deangelis is Democratic strategist and partner at Penta Group. Jack Kalavritino is a GOP strategist, a former Bush official with both the Bush administration and the Trump administrations. And you've also testified on Capitol Hill every now and then. A lot going on this week. I want to start with the Penn president. Obviously, there's been a firestorm since this testimony. It was a simple question. Yeah. If somebody calls for genocide on your campus, does that violate school policy? They couldn't come up with an answer. So, you've testified. How do people prepare for these things? How do you not sit down at that table and have an answer for that question?
Exactly. I don't know how. Now, there's this article talking about, and I saw some chatter about it, well, this is what happens when lawyers brief a witness as opposed to having their communications people. But I think that's a cop-out, actually. Yeah. Any president, any leader of a school should be able to clearly answer that question, and she and the others were given multiple opportunities to do so. So this is an expected accountability move. I'm actually a little bit shocked that it happened so quickly, that she's gone and the chairman of the board is gone.
Not to pile on Penn, but there have been calls for the MIT and the Harvard president just to step down as well. Bryan, this debate has opened up fissures on the Democratic side. Clearly there have been some calls from the left that have, walked up and in some places crossed this line about talking about Israel. How much of this is exposing differences in the Democratic Party? How much of this has to do with long-standing geopolitical differences on that region?
Well, I think it's okay to have differences within the party, but when you start talking about calls for genocide, that's going way too far. And so there are differences of opinion. There are folks who are concerned about the civilian casualties in, Gaza and other places, but this is not, what happened on Capitol Hill is unacceptable.
So you're a Democratic strategist. What would you say to Democrats who want to drive home a message that civilian lives should be protected, but yet not dip into, some of this more harsh talk that people who are supporters of Israel says, you're calling for genocide?
I think it's pretty simple. We've talked for years about the importance to protect ourselves, and Israel has that right, but any country, when it's in a wartime conflict, has to put the lives of civilians at a high priority.
We heard House Oversight Chairman Jim Comer earlier talking about the possibility of an impeachment proceeding. Also, we've had this news this past week of the Hunter Biden charges. I want to start with impeachment, though, Jack. The Republicans are seen to be on this wheel down the hill now on impeachment. Could this come back to bite Republicans indicting Joe Biden? Don't you need to know what he's done before you filed impeachment charges?
I mean, it could come back because I'm old enough to have seen what happened with Tom DeLay and the previous impeachment effort with Bill Clinton, and it didn't go so well for the GOP at that time. So I think what they need to do is continue to bring out data and information about how there could have been corruption and money going from Hunter Biden to his father based on these foreign entanglements, and not go down the path of impeachment, because there's almost a 0% chance that there would be a conviction in the Senate.
Now, we don't have to look back too far to see impeachments that didn't go the way the people who started them wanted them to go. And I'm talking about the impeachments that were brought against Donald Trump. One over Burisma in, the questions about Ukraine. Another one involving his actions on January 6th. When Democrats look on this right now, do they see opportunity in this, or do they want nothing to do with it?
Oh, I think it's a huge opportunity. I think indictment against Hunter Biden, the impeachment into President Biden, it has nothing to do with actual Joe Biden actions. And you compare that with Donald Trump's crimes against democracy, we'll have that debate all day.
I mean, I might have to disagree with that a little bit because this really isn't about taxes and the prostitutes and the drugs. This is about foreign representation with funds possibly going to his father while he was a sitting vice president. So this absolutely has to do with Joe Biden. And I think if that is proven, it'll be one of the biggest scandals of all time.
Some of the things that they're finding, though, are a loan over a pickup truck. I mean, it does not seem like they have the body of evidence at this point to proceed with this. I'm not saying that, down the line it might not.
Oh, good point.
But, is there something to that? Are they jumping the gun on this before we actually know what the facts are?
We've seen no evidence connecting Joe Biden to any of this, so the Republicans have quite a tall task if they're going to prove something. And I'd remind folks, next year in 2024, Hunter Biden's not on any ballots.
One thing that Republicans are not going to have is a majority as big as the one they had just a couple of days ago, because George Santos, as we know now, has been kicked out of the House. Kevin McCarthy said, I'm out of here. Obviously, the reasons behind both are dramatically different. Yeah. Talk about Kevin McCarthy for me for a minute, though, because, getting kicked out of the Speaker's chair, then saying he was going to stay on, then, deciding to leave. Did Kevin McCarthy leave the Republicans, or the Republicans leave Kevin McCarthy?
I mean, what was done to him, I think most Republicans would say, was a real tragedy, because he helped to make that majority, and that for him to lose the speakership was something that no one really wanted or counted on, other than those 8 that did that. But he said at the time when he lost the vote that he was going to do everything he could to support a majority, and that is what he's going to do next year. So the jury will be out, but we'll see. He's going to work hard to keep the majority.
Democrats look at this as a moot point if they want to take back the majority last year, though, right?
That's right. It's a little easier with the margins, but I think Speaker Johnson has his hands full as it is with that caucus.
Jack Kalavritino and Bryan Deangelis, we appreciate both of you coming in on this Sunday morning. We'll talk to you again real soon.